The news of Chinese actor Yu Menglong's passing on September 11, 2025 quickly resonated across the entertainment landscape, not only within China but internationally, and among those who publicly expressed their condolences was Suga, the BTS member known for his calm and reflective personality, who posted a message of sympathy on his personal social media account at the very same hour, when reports began circulating widely across Asian entertainment outlets, illustrating how swiftly the flow of information can unify a shared sense of loss that transcends borders. And in that moment, many fans recognized how emotional connections between public figures can emerge without requiring direct interaction, built instead on respect and appreciation for one another's work and the journey each has undertaken. Especially since Yu Menglong had long been admired for starting his career in popular dramas and steadily maintaining his reputation with a professional attitude, while Suga, through his musical career, has consistently shown a sensitivity to social issues that makes even his simplest statements resonate as personal and heartfelt. And as the hours passed following his post, the media began reporting that Suga's words of condolence were not only embraced by BTS fans, but also welcomed by fans of Chinese dramas, who felt that the loss of Yu Menglong had now received broader international acknowledgement, demonstrating how the dynamics of the modern entertainment industry allow a single announcement to bridge communities from entirely different cultural contexts. And as more time moved toward the late afternoon, numerous fan accounts began collecting and highlighting Suga's message as part of a broader narrative of cross-cultural solidarity, pointing out that moments like these emphasize the human side of global celebrities who choose to share in collective grief. And thus the coverage surrounding Yu Menglong's passing gradually expanded beyond the circumstances of his death itself into a reflection on how the entertainment world connects people, reminding audiences that the acknowledgement of a loss can hold just as much significance as the work an artist leaves behind. And by the end of the day, this progression of events formed a coherent portrait of how an expression of sympathy by a global musician naturally became part of the farewell for an actor who had quietly built his legacy in another country, giving this first episode in the ongoing coverage a tone that is both deeply human and naturally anchored in the flow of daily news without the need for dramatization or sensationalism. As the hours unfolded following the initial wave of reports on Yu Menglong's death, the response to Suga's message of condolence began to ripple through different layers of the entertainment community and the broader fan culture that exists online, with news portals translating and resharing the post in multiple languages, so that it could be read not only by Korean and Chinese fans, but also by global audiences who follow BTS, thereby creating an atmosphere in which the simple act of offering sympathy became an anchor point for collective expression. And by late morning, the narrative had shifted from the initial shock of the loss toward a more contemplative stream of stories about how public figures grieve for one another across borders, with Suga's name consistently appearing alongside Yu Menglong's in trending topics across several platforms, turning the tribute into a widely circulated moment that extended far beyond the original circle of followers. Media outlets began to add layers of analysis, noting how such expressions reflect the interconnected nature of the Asian entertainment industry, where music, film, and television coexist and influence one another's audiences. And while Suga and Yu Menglong had no known personal friendship, the symbolic weight of a Korean idol publicly honoring a Chinese actor resonated strongly in a regional context, often marked by competition yet now softened by empathy. And as journalists described it, the significance was less about a headline-grabbing gesture and more about the quiet dignity of one artist acknowledging another's passing with sincerity. Fan groups organized online memorial threads in which they combined images of Yu Menglong's acting career with screenshots of Suga's message, weaving together narratives of admiration that crossed linguistic and cultural barriers. And these compilations soon attracted thousands of interactions, proving how digital communities have the capacity to transform individual responses into collective archives of remembrance. By early afternoon, several entertainment commentators pointed out that the respectful tone of Suga's message had helped keep the conversation surrounding Yu Menglong centered on appreciation of his work rather than speculation about circumstances, thereby maintaining the dignity of the tribute and steering media coverage toward highlighting achievements and memories instead of sensational details, a dynamic that both Chinese and Korean outlets praised for its maturity. At the same time, international publications that regularly monitor K-pop activities began to include Yu Menglong's name in their coverage, explaining to readers unfamiliar with his work who he was and why his passing mattered, which in turn introduced his career to audiences who may never have encountered his dramas before, turning what began as a domestic loss into an opportunity for global recognition of his artistry. The flow of events during the afternoon illustrated how a celebrity's social media action, though seemingly simple in format, can function as a cultural bridge that expands the scope of remembrance, and the case of Suga and Menglong demonstrated the mechanics of this in real time, where one heartfelt line of condolence generated waves of attention that were documented, reshaped, and amplified through the continuous cycle of reporting, sharing, and reacting. Meanwhile, fans in Seoul began organizing small offline gatherings, lighting candles or placing flowers while sharing moments of silence that they recorded and uploaded online, not as grand memorials, but as intimate gestures influenced by the spirit of Suga's message, thereby proving how digital and physical acts of mourning can reinforce one another in contemporary fan culture. In Beijing and Shanghai, similar gestures were seen near cultural landmarks associated with television and film, where admirers of Menglong gathered quietly to leave notes of gratitude, and these gatherings were later reported in local media, further tying the threads of international sympathy into a visible pattern of commemoration that spanned borders. Journalists covering these developments remarked on how the progression of the day had created a narrative arc that began with breaking news, moved to celebrity reactions, extended to fan responses, and culminated in a broader reflection on the human side of fame, underscoring that even in industries dominated by schedules, releases, and metrics, moments of loss reveal the shared vulnerability of the people who inhabit these spaces. By late afternoon, editorials began appearing in major outlets noting that while Suga's tribute may have been just one among many, the visibility it provided brought Menglong's name into the global spotlight at a time when the world was collectively acknowledging his departure. And thus, what could have remained a localized mourning process became something larger and more inclusive. The coverage emphasized not only the sadness of the loss but also the grace with which public figures can shape the tone of communal grieving. And in that sense, the narrative of the day evolved with a sense of calm continuity rather than abrupt drama, portraying the interconnected world of Asian entertainment as a space capable of empathy and respect. This steady progression from one moment to the next demonstrated how gossip in its journalistic form can serve less as idle chatter and more as a documentation of cultural resonance, capturing how communities of fans, artists, and media professionals collectively navigate an event that touches them all in unique yet overlapping ways. And by the time evening approached, the flow of tributes and articles had formed a rich tapestry of remembrance that illustrated both the reach of Menglong's career and the sincerity of Suga's acknowledgement, closing the day with a portrait of solidarity that continued to be felt across platforms, timelines, and communities. As the evening hours unfolded on the same day when the news of Menglong's passing dominated headlines, the atmosphere around the entertainment world gradually shifted from the urgency of breaking updates toward the slower, more reflective rhythm of collective mourning. And within this rhythm, Suga's earlier message continued to play a central role in framing how the story was perceived across different regions. Because his act of sympathy was no longer being discussed merely as a reaction from one celebrity, but rather as a point of reference that anchored an entire cycle of responses, with journalists and commentators repeatedly citing his words in roundups and summaries of the day's events. Entertainment programs in South Korea included segments highlighting the global ripple effect of his post, often pairing it with brief retrospectives on Menglong's acting career, thereby introducing his name to viewers who might not have followed Chinese dramas but were familiar with BTS and curious about the figure that Suga had chosen to honor. And this cross-reference further illustrated how celebrity culture in the digital age functions as an interlinked network, where recognition is transferred through simple gestures that gain amplified significance when filtered through the lenses of media and fan communities. Meanwhile, in China, evening news outlets and online entertainment portals began to compile official tributes from colleagues, directors, and co-stars who had worked with Menglong. And within those long lists of condolences, the mention of Suga's post often appeared as a marker of international attention, subtly emphasizing that the actor's influence had extended beyond national borders, even if his career had been primarily rooted in domestic productions. The cultural significance of this was not lost on analysts who commented that such moments of cross-border acknowledgement reinforced the shared identity of Asian entertainment industries, where despite linguistic and cultural differences, there exists an undercurrent of mutual recognition shaped by shared audiences and digital platforms that transcend geography. As the clock moved into evening, fan-organized live streams began to appear, some led by communities dedicated to BTS, others by communities centered on Chinese dramas, and in a notable trend, many of these groups decided to merge their gatherings into joint sessions where they exchanged stories, shared clips of Menglong's acting performances, and reflected on the broader meaning of artists supporting one another in moments of loss. creating a sense of solidarity that would not have been possible without the connective tissue provided by Suga's post. These live streams were modest in production value, often hosted from personal devices, yet their emotional resonance lay in the shared act of remembering, and as screenshots circulated across platforms, the impression grew that fans were building a cross-cultural archive of remembrance in real time. Journalists monitoring online trends noted that the tone of conversation had remained consistently respectful throughout the day, with minimal diversion into gossip-driven speculation, and this stability was attributed in part to the example set by prominent figures like Suga, whose straightforward condolences left little room for sensationalism and instead encouraged a focus on dignity and gratitude. In the hours leading toward late evening, editorials in regional newspapers began to describe the day's progression as a case study in how celebrity culture, when handled with sincerity, can elevate mourning into a shared cultural moment, pointing out that while many tributes had been offered by fellow actors, the involvement of an international music star ensured that the message carried across linguistic and cultural barriers more swiftly than traditional news could have achieved. Online, hashtags combining both Suga's name and Menglong's continued to trend, often accompanied by fan art, digital collages, and reflective notes that blended the imagery of music and drama into a unified narrative of loss and respect, underscoring how fan creativity serves as a crucial mechanism for processing grief within entertainment communities. At the same time, producers and industry professionals quietly began discussing the broader implications of these events, noting that they highlighted the importance of solidarity in an era when entertainment is increasingly globalized. And while those discussions did not immediately translate into public statements, their existence hinted at how a single day of tributes can subtly influence long-term cultural dynamics. The steady flow of events throughout the evening demonstrated how the natural rhythm of news, beginning with breaking reports and evolving into personal responses, eventually settles into a pattern of collective reflection, and within that pattern the centrality of Suga's tribute remained constant, serving as both a symbolic gesture and a practical mechanism for connecting disparate communities. By the time night fully set in across East Asia, the online atmosphere had taken on a quieter tone, with many fans posting final messages of the day before resting, often accompanied by words of gratitude not only for Menglong's contributions to the entertainment world, but also for the simple acknowledgement offered by Suga, which they felt had elevated the dignity of the collective mourning process. Thus, the day concluded not with sensationalism or dramatic revelations, but with a calm sense of unity, carried forward by the steady flow of digital exchanges and respectful coverage that had transformed an individual act of condolence into a shared cultural moment spanning countries, industries, and fan communities alike, reinforcing the idea that in the interconnected world of contemporary entertainment, even the most personal expressions can ripple outward to shape the way loss is experienced collectively, leaving behind a record of empathy that will remain part of the broader narrative of Menglong's farewell. As the night deepened and the cycle of tributes to Menglong reached its natural conclusion for the day, the momentum generated by Suga's expression of condolence continued to be felt across platforms, but it settled into a quieter, steadier rhythm that reflected the way public grief gradually transitions from the urgency of immediate reaction into the slower process of collective remembrance. And in this phase, the coverage no longer centered on breaking updates, but on compiling the narrative of the day into cohesive stories that could be archived and revisited in the days to come. Online portals prepared detailed recaps that included timelines of events, beginning with the official announcement of Menglong's passing, followed by the immediate responses of colleagues and entertainment figures, and culminating in the international attention sparked by Suga's message, which was consistently framed as one of the key moments shaping the tone of the collective response. In these recaps, the emphasis was less on the celebrity status of those involved and more on the cultural meaning of the exchange, showing how one gesture of sympathy could bridge industries and audiences, and these articles provided readers with a sense of closure as the day came to an end. Fans, too, adjusted to the quieter atmosphere of the evening by posting reflective essays, longer threads, and carefully edited video tributes that blended scenes from Menglong's most beloved dramas with musical backdrops drawn from BTS tracks, a creative choice that symbolized the merging of two fan cultures into a single act of remembrance. The production of these tributes was not spontaneous chaos, but rather an organized flow, as fan collectives coordinated through group chats and forums to divide tasks, such as selecting clips, translating captions, and sharing the finished works across different platforms, ensuring that the memorials carried both accuracy and accessibility. These fan-made projects began circulating widely within hours, and while their immediate reach was limited to specific communities, the symbolic weight they carried reflected the ability of fans to transform grief into constructive creativity, a pattern often seen in the contemporary entertainment landscape where audiences take on an active role in shaping the legacy of their idols. Meanwhile, in the professional media sphere, cultural commentators began publishing longer pieces analyzing the day as an example of how entertainment news intersects with human emotion, emphasizing that what made the coverage compelling was not sensational revelation, but the calm, respectful tone that allowed space for mourning to unfold naturally. And in these analyses, Suga's role was consistently described as that of a connector who, through one brief message, expanded the narrative of Yu Menglong's passing beyond national borders. The evening also saw the emergence of editorials reflecting on the evolving expectations of celebrities in the digital age, noting that fans increasingly look to them not only for entertainment, but also for moments of empathy and acknowledgement during times of loss. And Suga's action was presented as a model of how such expectations can be met with sincerity and simplicity. Industry insiders interviewed for these pieces highlighted that while entertainment is often portrayed as competitive, moments like this remind the public that artists are also individuals capable of empathy, and that their gestures can influence how the entire ecosystem responds to grief. As midnight approached, the atmosphere across platforms grew quieter still, with hashtags slowing down and most active conversations shifting into private spaces where fans comforted one another, reflecting the natural winding down of a day defined by both loss and solidarity. This gradual closure marked the end of the first full cycle of public mourning, and while new tributes would undoubtedly follow in the days ahead, the initial arc had reached its conclusion, leaving behind a coherent record of how the entertainment world collectively processed the passing of one of its members. The role of Suga's message within that record remained a focal point, not because it overshadowed the tributes of others, but because it provided an accessible entry point for international audiences to join the conversation. And in doing so, it ensured that Yu Menglong's name would be remembered not only within the circles that had always cherished him, but also in new spaces where his work had not yet been fully known. This dynamic illustrated the evolving nature of celebrity culture in an interconnected world, where the boundaries of national industries are continually softened by the actions of figures whose influence crosses linguistic and cultural lines. And the steady progression of events throughout the day served as a clear example of how mourning in the digital era takes on both local and global dimensions. By the close of the night, the story had settled into a tone of calm reflection, carried by respectful articles, thoughtful fan tributes, and quiet offline gatherings that all contributed to a broader atmosphere of dignity. In this way, the cycle of gossip-driven coverage transformed into something more meaningful, offering readers and fans not only updates, but also a chance to share in a communal process of remembrance. The conclusion of the day did not require dramatic revelations or unresolved mysteries. Rather, it was defined by the simple recognition that one artist's farewell had been marked by the empathy of another, and that this act of solidarity had reverberated through countless communities, leaving behind a legacy of respect that would remain part of the cultural memory surrounding Yu Menglong's passing. Thus, as the digital lights dimmed and the final posts of the day appeared, the coverage closed on a natural note, portraying not only the sadness of the loss but also the quiet strength of unity, a fitting end to a day that began with shock and ended with dignity, ensuring that the memory of Yu Menglong, framed by both his own career and the empathy shown to him in his departure, would continue to resonate in the hearts of those who followed him and those who learned of him through the solidarity of the moment.